I'm going to show you today how to create a colorful twisting spiral of a shape in Adobe Illustrator. Now, it all begins with creating this donut shape and then these two little ellipses that we need to place on top of it. All the precise measurements, you can see them in the full version of this tutorial. Then we use the hole in the center of the donut and the oval shape as well, and we're going to cut away all the bits of the swoosh that aren't swooshy. This swoosh shape will in fact be the foundation of the spiraling effect for us. How do we create the swoosh? Well, you begin with the oval, stretch it out a little bit, and cut away all the bits that don't look swooshy. Again, in the full video, you see how exactly we make that. Now, we need to add some gradients to the swooshes to build up some depth here, and we apply a simple gradient around a stroke, make it huge, mask it to the donut shape, and then we add a colorful gradient to that shape. And then finally, we just add more layers of highlights and shadows, again using those swoosh shapes to build this complex and impressive colorful ring in Adobe Illustrator. So you've seen the finished product that we're going to make. I need to mention this video is sponsored by friends of the channel Envato Elements. If you're a designer and you think a huge designer toolbox of unlimited downloads for all types of different resources sounds useful to you, check out the link in the description to check them out. It's amazing. I think you'd love it. They're sponsoring this video, so thank you, Envato. And let's get into the tutorial. And here we are in Adobe Illustrator. So let's go ahead and go File, New to create a new document. We're going to go 1920 by 1080. Create that document. I'm going to make my thumbnails a little bit bigger, and we are going to just throw something of a background in here. Just click a single time. 1920 by 1080 is fine. I'm under View, Smart Guides. I have those turned on. It's going to be helpful for this tutorial at a couple points, but it also just allows me to sort of click my background into place. I'm going to select the stroke, get rid of it, select the color here. In fact, I'll double click on the color, and let's just go for a very light bluish color. It's just going to help us a little bit later on in terms of picking out some stuff off the background. Create a new layer, and on this layer, we will create our twisting colorful shape, right? We have the reference here for it. We're going to create something that looks like one of these, and you can see the sort of process we're going to go through down here. All right, it all begins by choosing the ellipse tool and clicking a single time and saying, hey, that's what I want, a 500 pixel by 500 pixel ellipse. I'm going to select this ellipse, and I want to align it to the center of my document, but I do want this to be just solid red so we can identify it easily off of our background. I'm going to come to my Align panel and align to the horizontal and vertical centers. Then what I want to do is duplicate this shape. So we're going to go Edit, Copy. We're going to choose Edit, Paste in Front. That's essentially paste in place. And it doesn't look like anything's happened. If we pop open our layer, though, you can see we have a second copy of our ellipse. I'm going to open up my Properties panel. I'm going to come over here to the reference point and choose the center reference point. And I'm also going to lock my width and height together. And I'm going to change it to 250 by 250. All right, so, actually, what I will also do is just change the color of this interior shape. So this donut shape is going to be the base of our entire project here. And with that in mind, we want to select both shapes, drag a selection over them, and duplicate them. Edit, Copy, and again, Edit, Paste in Front. You can see we got a copy of them now. We'll just shut those bottom layers off. We're just saving them there. It's going to be useful later on for cutting and adjusting some things. But with these two layers selected, open up your Pathfinder panel and choose this minus front option to create the donut shape that we need so much. Now I'm going to turn on that bottom ellipse once more. We're going to duplicate it, Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Front. We'll drag this one up to the top, shut off that bottom ellipse again so we don't mess with it, we don't touch it, we don't break it. And here with this shape, what I need to do is I need to create like an oval shape that's a little bit smaller, a bit shorter, and a tiny bit narrower, but also aligned to the very top center as perfectly as possible of this ellipse. So if we come to the Properties panel, we can set our reference point to the top center. Now when we change the width or height, the top center is going to be nailed in place, and everything is going to adjust around that. It's exactly what we want. We also want to uncheck the Maintain Proportions option because we want the width here to be 440, but the height we want to be 375. 375, by the way, brings us exactly to the inside lip of our donut. So that's exactly what we want for this top shape. Let's change the color of it here so you can see it. Cool. And we're going to duplicate this top shape. So select it, Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Front. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and I'm going to drag it straight down. And you're going to see it's going to click to the bottom of our base circle. So that's exactly what I want. In fact, I'll make the shape a little bit more pink. Now, this bottom shape here, this is going to be a cutting shape. We're just going to use this with our Pathfinder panel in order to slice away part of this top red shape, because this top red shape is going to form the swoosh, which is central to getting this effect to look right. So what we'll do here is we not only need this pink ellipse on the bottom, we need another copy of our center ellipse, and it's appearing as red here in the layers panel. So I just turn the layer on and shut it off, and it just sort of refreshes it. We're going to turn that on, select that center piece, and we're going to go edit copy, edit paste in front, drag that puppy up to the top, and then shut off that bottom shape. All right, so the pink and purple, those are our cutting shapes. Let's shut them off. We're going to work with our red shape, which is this ellipse right here. What I want to do here is I want to pull this shape out to the right and then kind of down a little bit because the swoosh is going to begin over on the left side of the donut and come all the way down over like around this area. So we need to make sure down here is covered with this red shape. So with the direct selection tool, it's the white arrow. You're going to select the anchor point in the center. I can probably make my screen a little bigger here, by the way. You're going to select the anchor point right here in the middle, and I'm just going to drag it straight over. I'm holding the shift key, and then I'm going to hold, well, I'm not going to hold any key. I'm just going to pull this tangent handle downward like that. Just make a nice big old shape that comes way off to the side here, just like so. Now turn on that center cut piece, right? And we're going to just hold down shift and select the purpley center. Go to our Pathfinder panel and just choose minus front. Great. We've punched the hole in the middle. Now we need to make two more cuts, one on each finger, I guess. And that's going to allow us to really get the swooshy shape that we need. Let's turn on our bottom pink layer. I'm going to drag it on top of my path. What we want to do is get rid of the entire left side of the shape. So I'm again going to use my direct selection tool. I'm just going to select that anchor point over on the left side, hit my delete key. Bing, we get rid of it. We have exactly what we need. Hold down shift, select that red key, or that red piece again. And once more, we're going to choose minus front. All right, so we're cutting away to get our swooshy shape. You can see it sort of coming into form here. Then we're going to duplicate our bottom donut shape layer or compound path here. So we'll go edit copy, edit paste in front. I apologize if I'm moving through this a little bit quick. Just use that pause key or pause button. If I move too slowly, we'll be here for 2 hours working on this. So with this shape, I'm now going to select both of these. So the top compound path and this new sort of cut up path that I have. And I'm going to choose to save just the areas that intersect one another. And this is going to give me the first piece of my wrapping swoosh. So it wraps right around the edge of our shape. Now, we need to duplicate this shape, so we're going to go edit copy. We only need 2 of these, edit paste in front. And here we're presented with a little bit of an interesting problem. We want to hold down shift and rotate this 2 clicks, just like that. But you can see when I do that, nothing's lined up right, and it's probably not going to line up perfectly. Even trying to drag it and nudge it into place, it's just going to be a little difficult. So the way around this here is to select our top path, the pink piece here, and also hold down the control key here and select the compound path in the layers panel as well. And now hold down shift. Now, by the way, what's happening is the reference point around which we're going to rotate this has now moved to the exact center of the donut shape. And of course, that's the axis on which we want all of this to spin. So we're going to hold down shift and we're going to click 1, click 2 times, and there we now have what looks like 3 swooshing shapes moving around this donut. This is the base of what we are going to use to get this effect that we need today. So we begin with our top paths here, and I am going to fill them with white and black gradients. So with the pink swoosh selected, we can go to our gradient panel and just click on the gradient fill. Great. And I am going to flip this. I want the white to be over here on the right side, so I'm going to hit reverse gradient. I'm going to add a little bit more white, fade the white in here, maybe pull the black up a little bit more like that. We can rotate it on a bit more of an angle too, just to help set us up for better success in the future when we really need a strong shadow edge up there dividing the 2 top portions of this swoosh. So something like that's probably pretty good. Cool. I'm going to set this layer to the blend mode. Here in my transparency panel, the blend mode of overlay. Looks like we just made half of it disappear. Don't worry, it's still there. We're going to select the other piece of red swoosh. This is still normal blend mode, 100% opacity. Red fill though. We can grab our eyedropper tool and just sample that same gradient right here. Now it looks wonky because it's moving the same same direction, and we don't want that. We want to grab our gradient tool, and we're going to pull down. In fact, I'm going to reverse this gradient here because we want this shape up at the top to bring in a bunch of light and have shadows down here at the bottom. Now, you'll notice something interesting happening here. It looks like we have 4 individual sort of swoosh shapes. Why is this happening? We actually only have 2. Well, what's happening here is the swoosh shapes, because they are set to the blend mode overlay, they're interacting with one another. They're now semi-transparent. So where the 2 swoosh shapes overlap, we're seeing through, and it looks like there is now a 4th shape. So it's just adding depth to our twisting spiral shape, right? So that's part of why we're going with this overlay blend mode. And now the black, if you look up here, the black in the bottom tips of this big swoosh shape, well, it looks like the shadow at the bottom of this swoosh shape, but also the shadow at the bottom of this swoosh shape. But according to Illustrator, as far as Illustrator knows, it's the same shape, but it's interacting with the shape underneath because we're using some blend modes here. Now we want to select our bottom compound shape and give this a black to white gradient. So I'm just going to say, yeah, give me a black to white gradient. I want this to be a black to white gradient, though, that starts white on the left and runs to black over here on the right. So I'm just going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to double click on the black handle. It's just black in the K. I'm going to go CMYK, and I'm just going to push it to 100% black in all channels. And I'm going to grab my gradient tool, and I'm just going to make sure that this is going side to side. Just something like that. Now, we're going to end up setting this to a blend mode and reducing the opacity later. I don't want to do that right now because I want to still see this kind of aperture looking effect that we have happening on screen now. Let's go ahead and create the sort of inner shadow and little bit of light that's traveling through the middle of our spiral shape, and then we're going to add some color. We're going to select that compound shape that we just worked with, and we're going to duplicate it, edit copy, edit paste in front. I'm going to drag it up on top of everything though, and we're going to give this the radial gradient here. Now what we're going to do with the radial gradient is we want to push the whites way up into the middle. So we want the white to begin showing up here, and we're going to duplicate. We're going to add a second black handle here, and I'm going to pull this over to the other side. You can see what this is going to do. It's going to allow us to have this, this kind of electric pulse running through our little glowing spiral here. In fact, I'm going to make this a solid white. And what I might do is reduce the opacity of this quite a bit, something like so. Bring the black up. And then what I want to do is I want to set this to the blend mode overlay. But what's going to happen when I do that is it's really going to beat up on the edges of our shape. Now we can't really see what it's doing because our color's not in there yet, so we should probably go and add some color and then revisit this sort of inner pulse, and you'll really see what this is doing. So let's just shut the eye off on that layer for a second. We'll touch base with that in just a second. All right, well, our sponsor for today is Envato Elements. If you are a designer, photographer, logo designer, anybody who would use any type of stock resources, brushes, fonts, photos, graphics templates, even full-fledged WordPress templates, and motion graphics, and all types of things like that, Envato Elements is going to be perfect for you, and they just so happen to be our sponsor today. We love them. It's a subscription service, one small monthly fee, and guess what? Unlimited downloads of millions of different design elements and all sorts of different things. Getting access to Envato Elements, it's like having the world's largest design toolbox. Bang! Added to your workflow instantly. Just think of all the different things you could do with it, all the little things you could add to increase the value you offer to your clients that are going to make it seem like you're doing all this extra work, but it's really because you have this sort of secret tool you can pull out of your toolbox. So check out Envato using that link down in the description of this video. Grab a subscription today. If you subscribe using my link, you support this channel, so go get that subscription. So thank you, and thank you to Envato for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the show. Let's go ahead and grab the original ellipse, right? So this original red ellipse and duplicate it. Edit copy, and we're going to go edit paste in front, drag it up on top of everything. So the idea here, and if I go back to the original AI document, the idea here is to have a gradient not that runs across our object, but one that runs around it. right? A lot of different ways you can do this. You can use the blend tool. I suppose you can use the newer freeform gradients. But what I want to do is I want to just apply this gradient to a stroke and then mask it to our shape here. So I'm going to flip my fill into becoming a stroke, and I'm going to say, hey, go to the strokes. I'm going to set the weight of the stroke to like 300 points, massive, ridiculous, over the top. I'm going to go back to my gradient panel, and I want to make sure here, I don't want the fill pulled up to the front, right? We're not working on the fill. We're working on the stroke, baby. So bring the stroke up and then hit black to white gradient. And you can see what's happening. The gradient is applying across our shape. I want the gradient to be going around the shape. So I'm going to hit this option in the middle, apply gradient along stroke. And you can see it's applying the gradient now along the stroke, just whoop, just around like that. Now, I want my break in the action to be at the top, so I'm going to hold down Shift and just click it twice back up to the top. And what we're going to do is create a custom gradient here. So I'm going to add 3 handles, one around the 25% marker, one around the 50%, and you can see here down in location, that's what I'm referring to. I'm going to add it around the 50% location, and then around 75%. They don't need to be precise and exact, just kind of hanging around. And I am going to double click this point here, the white point. We're going to go RGB out of the hamburger menu. And I have some hex codes I'm going to punch in. I've got them written down here. So this one is CE2951. It's this kind of pinkish red color. In fact, I'm going to double click it and just Command or Control C to copy, and then move over here, RGB, double click, Command or Control V to paste. I hit Tab, and you can see now we have pink. And the reason we're putting this pinkish red on both the ends of the gradient is because both the ends of the gradient come together there at the top of our shape. Thus, we want this to look like a seamless gradient all the way around. So the beginning and the end both have to be the same shape, and you're going to have a continuous ring of color. Then we're going to add kind of an orangey yellow color here, and that code is E5AB05. I may actually make this a little bit more yellow, something like that. Might be a little nicer. Then we're going to add a green here, and this is 32BA45. You can see it's a nice green. I might make this more of a seafoamy green, because we're going to be adding a blue as our final color here. And this blue, now that I've adjusted those two, I'm sure is going to have to be adjusted to. It's 677FD3. And yeah, I'm going to make this more of like a beachy blue color. Ooh, it's a little bit too bright. Something kind of like that. We don't want to go too wild with the colors. I like having kind of like slightly muted colors here. I think it's going to look nicer, especially as we begin piling on some lighting type effects on top of this. Now, we need to obviously mask this to the size of our donut because it's ridiculously big, but it's great because we're going to certainly have plenty of coverage. Let's grab our original compound path here and duplicate it. We're going to use a clipping mask here. So edit copy, edit paste in front. Great. We're just going to fill this with whatever color. It can be anything. We'll make it green. And then this is the layer here. So we're going to drag this up on top of our rainbow layer. And we're going to select both of these layers. Hold down Shift and select both of the little circles in the layer panel. Go Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And that top shape basically just cuts a hole through and preserves just the areas that intersect. As we see, right now we have our donut and it's perfectly going to be covered with this rainbow color. So let's get the rainbow color down in place. The rainbow color is the base of our shape, so we're going to move it below everything. Now it's disappeared. That's because this compound path here, that white to black gradient, if you recall a few minutes ago, about 100 things ago that I said, I had mentioned that we're going to change the blend mode and change the opacity of this. We're going to do that now. Up here in the transparency panel, let's try setting this to maybe overlay. Something like that. Or maybe, what does soft light look like? Ooh, soft light's kind of, let's go with soft light. I kind of like that. Kind of nice and subtle, and then we can still reduce the opacity a little bit. All we're doing is we're adding an additional layer of lighting change on top of that gradient. So first we have all the color change of the gradient moving around. Now we're going to have a brightness change that's fading left to right, across our gradient. So we're just layering on subtlety after subtlety, and it's going to build the depth of this sort of extrusion that we're working on. Now, by the way, let's turn on our inner glow layer, and you can see that this just looks not great. That's because this now needs to be edited quite a bit. Let's go ahead and just move the black on the outside way out there. I want to move the ring up a little bit into our shape a little bit more. A little bit closer to the center, kind of something like that. And the black is way too aggressive. So let's just select our black sliders and reduce the opacity. So like knock it down to like 40%. What does that look like? All right. I kind of dig it. I kind of like it. Maybe on the outside, I'll knock it down even further. 20% maybe. let's go 30%. And then the inside, I do want the inside to be a little bit darker, a little bit more aggressive on the inside. Something like that might look nice. So I got 50% for that. So that's cool. I like that a lot. If you really absolutely feel inclined to, you could knock the opacity down a couple points there for the white, but you really want to preserve that real specularness of the highlights that you're going to get in that real sharp biting edge. Now let's go ahead and grab our bottom compound path. We're going to duplicate this again, copy, and then paste in front. What we're going to do here is drag this to the top. I'm going to set the opacity to 100% and then normal again. What we want to do is just rotate the gradient here. We want to add a little more darkness at the bottom and brightness at the top of our donut shape. I'm just going to do this with a gradient tool. So let's just pull this in like this. Cool. Something like so is great. And then we'll grab our black arrow and then go like overlay. And something like that, and just reduce the opacity quite a bit. We'll take the opacity down 20-25%, something like that. So you can see we're just changing up the effect a little bit, just changing the dynamics of the light. And now what we have here is a whole series of shapes that you can see the edges curling through the donut. Well, we want to accentuate those edges, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to do it with our twisting swoosh shapes here. So I'm going to select both of these shapes, and we're going to duplicate them by going Edit Copy and then Edit Paste in front. And I'm going to drag these guys right up to the top here. We're going to fill them with white, and then we're going to say, hey, flip that fill right over to the stroke because we need this to be a stroke immediately. And we want to change the weight of the stroke to 4 points, and I want to align the stroke to the outside of these shapes. So you can see what we've got going on here. We've now just added all these sort of colorful shapes. In fact, I kind of like them set to overlay. 100% is fine. We can always adjust that stuff later. What happens if we add a rounded corner? That's interesting, but if you can imagine, we're going to be masking away and getting rid of all of the lines on the outside and even inside of the shape. So I want to do some more work here in terms of cleaning this up. I really don't want it just to be this rounded edge that just dumps right to the edge. So let's grab our direct selection tool and just adjust, right? So we're just going to kind of pull that off there, and then we have the obvious problem here that, hey, this doesn't really align anymore with the edge of our little situation here, or the edge of our swooshing shape. So we need to use our tangent handle and adjust that. Okay, I'm going to do it here to this one as well. Let's go ahead. Ooh, wrong one. I selected the wrong anchor point. We're going to select in here, and I want to, well, let me shut off the one that's not helping me here. So we can shut that layer off. Let's work with just this here. So we're going to go ahead and fade that right off. Cool. And again, I'm going to grab the tangent handle and just pull it back out. Kind of to right there is good. You just want to kind of use your eyes here, whatever looks right to you. Doesn't have to be perfect, but, closer you get to perfect. Nobody complains about perfect, I don't think. And then we'll take this anchor point here, and we're just going to use the arrow keys and just kind of pull that off out into nothingness, right? Just kind of out there. Cool. And let's turn on the other path real quick because we also have another point floating out here. So we'll select that path, and here's where I'll shut off this top layer. Let's select that, and just again, we're going to fade this right off to nothingness just to give us a nice sharp cut, or just blend off the edge of the donut. It's not that complicated. We're going to select both of these paths. I am going to set these back to the normal blend mode because we're going to group them, and I'll set the group to the blend mode of overlay just for the sake of not losing track of what's here. And I'll call this like highlights or highlight edges. We'll set this to the blend mode overlay. Now we need to mask this to get rid of all that extraneous stroke mess around the edges. We're going to do that with really any one of the donut shapes that we have. So I'll just take the top donut shape, go Edit Copy, Edit Paste in front, and then we're going to set this to the normal blend mode, opacity 100%. Great. I just pasted it there so we could see it, and because if you paste it in a mask with all the blend modes, you're going to be wondering what's going on. Now we're going to cut this because we want to cut it, get rid of it on the artboard, and we're going to paste it into the mask. Where's the mask? Well, the mask is going to be here on the highlights layer group. So we're going to select that layer circle, right, the little selection circle. Up here in the transparency panel, we're going to then double click this blank thumbnail area. You can see all the lines disappear. Now we go Edit, Paste in front. And we just fill this with like white, right? In fact, you could fill it with a gradient and, a radial gradient that has black coming out of the center and sort of fade the inside parts of these paths. Maybe we'll come back and do that later if it looks like we need it. But for now, We're going to leave this as it is. Maybe reduce the opacity of our lines a little bit. Oop, and I hit the release button accidentally. Maybe just bring the opacity down around 75%. And we've got these nice lines that are clipped right into place there. So the next thing we want to do is add a series of shapes to allow us to add more highlight and shadow to each of these sort of 4 pieces of swoosh. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to go back to our old compound path and shift click not only that old donut shape, but the 2 original swooshes, and we're going to copy them. Edit copy. I'm going to lock all the layers here because things are going to get a little messy, not too messy, but a little messy. I'm going to select the top layer here, and we're going to go edit paste in front, bump those layers up to the top. Let's just set all 3 of them to the normal blend mode, 100% opacity. We're not going to mess around here. And then for the color, let's go swatches and just, I don't know, make them green or something. Just something that we can see what's going on here. Now, what I want to do is each of these sort of shapes that you can see, or maybe you can't quite see them. If I double click this layer here, we can change the color of our little lines to maybe green. That might be a little easier to see, right? Each of these cells, or whatever you want to call them, we want them to be individual shapes. How do we do it? Well, with all 3 of these layers selected, just like we have them, we're going to go to Pathfinder and we're going to choose Divide right down here. It's divided into like all of the artwork that's stacked on top of one another. Illustrator's basically said, I'm just cutting everything along any overlapping path, which now is going to give us these 4 shapes. Problem is, it's also given us tons of little tiny paths where there's like little micro discrepancies. So how do we deal with that? Because there's a lot of these paths. Well, what we're going to do is with the whole group selected, we're first going to go Object Ungroup. What I know I want are these 4 pieces. So let's select them. Select the first one, hold down Shift, select the second, select the third, select the fourth. Great. We're going to go Object, we're going to group these together. Group, bing. We got them, cool, let's shut them off. All right, doesn't look like there's much there, but there are all these paths. So I'm going to hold down Shift and select the top path here in my, I'm going to select the top path and then I'm going to hold down Shift in my Layers panel. And I'm going all the way down to the bottom, right to here, to this bottom path. There you go, I select it. I was holding down Shift and all of them are selected. Then I hit the little garbage can icon. Get rid of all of them. Turn these top layers back on. In fact, I'm going to select that group and we're now going to ungroup the group. Because what we're going to do is we're going to begin adding gradients to these shapes. So I'll start with highlights. Let's go ahead and add a black to white gradient. Over here on the gradient panel, I'm going to just make it white to white. So we're going to go white to white. And then I'm going to set the opacity of the other white handle to 0%. So we essentially are going to have a white to transparent gradient, right? So we can dump a highlight in wherever we see fit. I believe I'm going to try setting the blend mode of this layer to something like color burn, or not color burn, excuse me, color dodge or overlay. And then here's where I would begin fussing with my gradient. So we'll take like the gradient and say, where are you? There you are right there. So we're going to add a really strong highlight up here in this top corner. And you can see I can even adjust the gradient on the fly on this slider, something like so. That's kind of interesting. I might just stick with that. And then what's great now is I can select this next shape, grab my eyedropper tool, and just sample that white to transparent gradient, okay? And then I can grab my gradient tool here, and I can say, look, I want your highlight to be more like over on this side here, right? Maybe I want you to interact a little bit with that highlight inside, right? Remember we made that ring of highlight before? That's kind of cool. I can fade this back a little bit, fade it out forward a little. Something like so. You can always adjust the opacity and things like that. And then we're going to go ahead and grab the next shape. Hit the letter I, that's our eyedropper tool, and sample the gradient before. Cool. We're going to grab the gradient tool here. And in this case, I think I'll just throw a little highlight in over here. That's cool. Then I'm going to grab my final shape, hit the letter I, and I'm going to sample that gradient. And for here, I don't know where. I think maybe I want a little bit of a highlight on the inside, something like that. Doesn't need to be anything too crazy. Something like that's probably just fine. Okay, that's cool. So we've done 4 highlight pieces. That's interesting. Let's now duplicate these paths. So we're going to select all 4 of the paths here. Edit, copy, edit, paste in front. It's going to just really blow out the whites a little bit. But these are now going to be our darker gradients. So I'll select the first shape, and we're going to make a black to black gradient. So I'm going to just get rid of any extra anchor handles. I'm going to select the shape. We're going to go black. And then on the other side, we're going to go black. And now we have a black to transparent gradient. So let's see here which shape we're working with. What shape is this? This is the shape on the bottom here. So I'm going to select it again, grab my gradient tool, and here I want to darken this edge back here. So that's what I want to darken. That's what I want to do. I want to make sure there's good contrast between this bottom portion of our spiral and what's going to be a very heavily lit portion here on the top. So that's cool. And just like we did before, we can just select the other shapes, grab the eyedropper tool, and now sample this shape on the bottom that has our new black to transparent gradient. Nice. And then here I want the shadow to be down here on the bottom, right? Coming up through here. Oh, it doesn't need to be too crazy powerful. In fact, I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit because it's a little over the top. You got to grab your black arrow tool here, by the way, and then reduce the opacity. So something like that is probably about what I want. We're going to go to the next shape, which is now this piece over here. Grab the eyedropper tool again, sample that same dark gradient, and yeah, I think I do want to darken up like this edge over here. That's probably about right. Maybe some, I don't know, maybe down here. Yeah, maybe I want to darken up down here, actually. That looks pretty nice. Something like so. And then finally, our final shape. Grab the eyedropper tool. You can grab any of the darkening gradients. And then what we want to do here is just make sure we have a nice bit of shadow down here, just contrasting off of the heavily highlighted top portion of our shape. That's great. And then I did notice a moment before with this here, when we duplicate that, it does something really interesting to the highlight. I kind of like it. So I'm just selecting this one individual shape, and let's go edit copy, edit paste in front. It really blows it out quite a bit. What happens if I just kind of spread it out a little bit? Even maybe select that, just reduce the opacity a little bit. Just give it a little intensity, but it doesn't have to be, we don't have to go wild here. Just something that's interesting. Maybe make a sharper edge up there. We're just layering on more lighting effects like that. So now with all of this stuff on and off, you can see there it is before and here it is after. We're just really building up the depth of the shape in general. Now, I think I do want to go back and add that radial gradient to the middle. I think it's going to add something to it. So I'm going to unlock the highlights layer, select that, select the mask that we had on there, right? And then we are just going to, we have the fill selected. I'm going to go to swatches and I'm going to say, give me the standard black to white gradient. We're going to make it a radial gradient. If I go back to the transparency panel, you can see what we've got. What we actually want is majority to be white and like this black glow, or the glow that's now coming around this black shape, we want that to be black glow. So we need to reverse the gradient, right? We want most of our lines to be showing. In fact, I'm going to double click the black slider. We're going to hit CMYK here. I know it went off screen a little bit. I'm going to make sure it's rich black so we really are hiding whatever's back in there. And then I'm going to begin pulling this out of the center until I see the inside parts of those lines begin to disappear a little bit. Right, so something like so. Maybe we can fade it a little bit out. Maybe I don't want to fade it that much. Maybe I want it to be a sharper edge, but I want it to be kind of sudden there in the middle. And then I'm going to hit my thumbnail up here just to get out of that editing mode. And you can see what we've done. It's a kind of a really nice effect like that. Now, one thing you might want to do is now go back to like your color, and it's maybe a little bit too saturated. So if we're going to change anything, what we may want to do is come in here, select our donut shape on top of this, and we're just going to duplicate it, edit copy, of course, edit paste in front. And I'm going to select the shape on the bottom here because we want the shape that's just on top of the color. That's what we're looking to edit here. And I'm going to set this to a blend mode of normal, opacity 100%, and we're going to fill this with just a solid color, but the color has to be saturation 0. So it could be anything. It could be a medium gray for all I care. Something like this. And we're going to set the blend mode of this layer to saturation. So this is going to be sort of a saturation control because down at 0%, all the color comes through. At like 10, 15%, we're getting rid of some of the opacity or some of the saturation, right? So it's a bit of a saturation control on what we have happening underneath. So I'm just going to knock out just a couple little ticks of saturation, right? 15, 18% here maybe, right? And there's a before, there's after, right? It's just giving us, I think, a little bit richer of an effect, a little bit more of like maybe a metallic look to it as well. I think it's just a little bit nicer. So that, I believe, is going to wrap up creating this effect here in Adobe Illustrator. Of course, one last thing I guess would be just select everything, Command or Control G to group it together, and then you could drag out copies of it and try rotating them and see if any other orientation looks nice to you or anything like that.